Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of this miniature ASMR podcast. Today I'm joined by a friend of mine who has been my friend for, I think, about 3 years now, in the audio community, even a little bit before when I started going to YouTube. Um, Her name is Always Slightly Sleepy, and she also has a YouTube channel of her own where she does ASMR. Thank you for joining me today, Sleepy.
Hi, thank you.
So, today we thought we would talk about vacation memories, and this could be memories from when we were very, very little or up until the present day. Um, and this all comes down to what we value in vacations, and specifically when it comes to our childhood memories, how they kind of shaped us into who we are and what we value today. For me, this starts in Florida. My family has always liked going there, and I think I've gone there ever since before I can remember. Um, in fact, I think some of my earliest memories can be traced back to that beach that my family used to go to. There's not much that I remember from back then, only a couple still frames in my mind. Um, and one of them is the shape of that beach. It's a very nice little confined area with um, two pools on the side, kind of bookending the whole thing. Um, and the reason why this was nice is because it gave me, who at the time could barely even walk, free reins to go wherever I wanted to in that area. My family had a little cottage or rented a little cottage down there that was on stilts so they could have a vantage point and see me wherever I was going. For little kids, especially that little, barely could walk, um, there's so few situations where you would ever be able to freely roam around at all. So for me, as a very little kid, that was a very valuable experience. Um, and I feel like that really affected me and what I value in, oh, I don't know, like art, video games, things like that, where you can
Yeah.
freely roam around and be like, no time limits, just explore at your own pace. It could be um, Banjo Kazooie, it could be Journey, it could be,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even up to these modern games where they're free roaming,
Yeah,
big, huge
definitely.
environments.
Yeah, I definitely love exploring in Skyrim, just running from one end of the map to the other, especially in more recent playthroughs that I've done. I find it so much more fun to just take my time in the world and, look at all the not the northern lights because it's Skyrim and lights are different, but, the equivalent of like the northern lights and listen to the wolves howling and being randomly approached by strangers just along the path. That is easily, to me, the best part of playing Skyrim.
Yeah, that's right. As a kid, you're much more able to have a mysterious mind towards something, to not know what's going to happen next or what you're going to find in a certain place when you go exploring. As
Mm-hmm.
an adult, that's sort of much, much harder to come by because you become more jaded, you become more knowledgeable about how games are made. So you just say, um, oh, that this is going to be like a certain level like this, there's going to be this, there's going to be that, I know what to expect. But in order to create that childlike sense of wonder, you really need a bigger map, a lot more stuff, and it's really a shame because those games are so time consuming to make. But you're right, when you're playing in Skyrim, at least for the first couple playthroughs, you go outside of a city and you have no idea what's going to happen to you, and that's really cool. That's a really nice feeling to have. Um, but going back to Florida, um, I remember a lot of those little tiny images of like the angle of which I was looking at things, like how big the pools looked. how tall the chairs at the bars looked. Like the pool on the right side of the beach had this like little flamingo bar, I think, or something like that. You know what? I'm remembering more and more as I talk about it. There are little plastic swords that they put into their drinks. I
Mm-hmm.
remember getting to somehow, I don't know how, I was able to get myself up there, like, and sit on those tall chairs, and I felt really special and cool.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So, Sleepy, what are some of your fonder memories of childhood vacations?
Well, one of my earliest memories of a really fun childhood vacation was whenever my dad took my sister and I camping one summer, and we were on like this island in the middle of some body of water, and I don't even know which body of water it was. I would know that I was around 6 or 7 at the time, and it's actually a very confusing memory because I very clearly remember it being about a week long. And I even remember my dad saying during the trip that we were extending it a few days. Like one night he just said, we could stay here a few more nights if you want. And I remember saying, yes, that sounds really fun. And so we extended the trip to a week. And then as soon as we got home from the trip, everyone around me, including my dad and my sister and my mom and everyone else who knew about the trip, they all said that the trip was like 3 or 4 days. And I knew that it wasn't. But according to the calendar, it was. And I was just forever so confused about that. So still, it's very difficult for me to comprehend what happened there. I'm convinced it was some sort of glitch in the matrix. But what made the memory so cool was that with no technology for so long, and at that age I wasn't like a technology addict in the way that I am now. I didn't have a computer, I didn't have a phone, but still, just not being around cars and street lights and TVs and just being in the middle of nowhere. We were the only tent on this island, and we were surrounded by water, and the sky was so full of stars. And one night I remember me and my dad went out and we had headlights on and we were splashing through the water and we were looking for frogs. And I would never do this anymore because I'm vegan, but at the time I had not developed that part of my ethical personality, I guess. And we were catching frogs and we roasted them over a campfire like freaking hot dogs. And we ate them, and it was such a strange and wonderful dinner, not because it tasted good, but because it was just such a human experience. And then there was one of my other little favorite snippets from that vacation is my sister and I were playing between these two sandbanks. And between the two sandbanks, the current was flowing really fast because it was, like pushing through where it could. And so one of us, between my sister and I, would stand upstream, and the other one of us would stand downstream. And whichever one of us was upstream would like let go with their body and just let the current pull them backwards, and whoever was on the downstream side would like catch them. And so it was just kind of us experimenting and letting us feel that sensation of being completely picked up and taken with the current. And that feeling really sunk into my bones, I think, because it's something that I still dream about all the time, just being swept up and having my body be like completely out of my control and at the mercy of Mother Nature.
Yeah, I have felt that in the past myself, but I can't remember what exactly was happening. It must have been something about like the ocean waves, but you
Mm-hmm.
do absolutely feel powerless. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, you said that one meal that you had with the frogs was really special,
Mm-hmm.
for being a human experience. Was it maybe because it was like a nature to table kind of thing? There was no disconnect between where your food comes from
Yeah.
and, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think so for sure. I mean, even at that age, I didn't like killing the frogs, not at all. But just seeing the entire process of the food, I think was really interesting. And I still get that same feeling from being able to go into the forest and like knowing what leaves or what berries are safe to eat and which ones aren't. I kind of still get that same rush of like, ooh, nature. I'm a harvester.
Absolutely. Yeah. 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 Um, so when it comes to like catching food and stuff, I
Mm-hmm.
think on and off fishing has been a big part of those trips for me.
Ah, yeah.
Um, and I remember I must have been 10 maybe. My dad's friend was down in Florida. I think he does or did live there. And he fished a whole lot. And so we went down there and we met up with him. And he let me use his rod. And he said, well, you don't really catch stuff that often. Um, I don't know if it was the spot or just the nature of that kind of fish that we were trying to catch or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But I got one on my first try. They
Nice.
were amazed. But yeah, we went like further down the road um, of time. That is further down the road of time. We went on group fishing trips where they had these larger charters where groups of 12 or maybe even more went out and
Yeah.
to certain fishing spots. And I remember going on like solo fishing trips with just me and my family. Um, but those were really interesting times when we would watch the horizon shrink, or rather the island shrink into the horizon
Mm.
as we sailed out to sea. And yeah, I remember packing lunches and not having much to do. And interestingly enough, having no choice in what you could do made the simple things much, much more memorable.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, for all the good stuff that we have today, I kind of miss having limited options. Because I
Mm-hmm.
feel like when you have every option, you just don't pick anything and it just becomes boring.
Yeah, actually, some of my other favorite vacation memories, I was always kind of made fun of by my family because every time we went on a vacation, and I'm just going to kind of lump a whole bunch of separate memories into one here, but
Mm-hmm.
I would always end up just finding a really cozy place in wherever we were staying and curling up in the blankets, usually right next to a window, and reading a good book. Um, and I would get teased because, like, I wasn't going outside. I wasn't enjoying the special location or going to the city. I wasn't buying anything. I was doing something that I do all the time back home.
Yeah.
Um, but it felt different and it still felt special. And I don't know, it was still really nice. And I value those memories of just curling up next to a really cozy window and reading and kind of being whisked away into another world.
I feel that similarly as well. The location of that kind of thing makes all the difference.
Mm-hmm.
Completely unrelated to that phenomenon of being whisked away, like, while reading a book in a certain location.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think the second to last trip I ever took down to Florida was with my best friend. Um, and a lot of the time we just watched really, really funny videos. And for some reason we were
Yeah.
so hooked. It was just like our favorite thing. It was, you know what? I remember what it was. It was um, Team Four Stars Dragon Ball Z Abridged. The funniest stuff. And I remember us like having both of our elbows on the table, like smiling really, really wide. And
Yeah.
my mom was really mad at us. And it's like, hey, you can't get any happier than this. You can't. It's tops.
Mm-hmm.
It's tops.
Definitely. Going back to the feeling that we were talking about earlier of finding that sort of wanderlust in the first memory that you talked about, I had a similar experience much later in my life. When I was 16, for the first time, I went to Boston, and that that really woke up the wanderer in me. I always knew that I liked exploring and stuff like that, but I had never been in an area where I was totally allowed to kind of let loose and
Mm-hmm.
just walk to my heart's content. So the reason that I went was because someone in my family was actually attending a conference in Boston, and it was like a business conference, and they invited me to go with them just because they knew that I had never been to the city. And so I went with them, and they were at the conference the entire, or pretty much the entire time, except for the evenings when we would have dinner. Um, but other than that, I was totally alone in the city, and it kind of felt like a solo vacation.
Mm.
And I didn't have very much of my own money. I was just a young teenager. I was in high school. I didn't have a job. I didn't even have an allowance. And so I had like maybe $30, and I didn't spend
Yep.
any of it. I didn't want to. I just enjoyed walking around, talking to the people who owned art galleries, exploring different little shops, window shopping a lot, and just being in a new city and being alone as well. There's so much freedom in solitude, I think. And I mean, I would walk like miles and miles every day. It was ridiculous. And it was also freezing, but I didn't care because I loved it so much.
Yeah.
And I got to see snow, which is something that I don't see too often where I'm from. And man, that was such a magical experience. And I really felt my independence while fostering my wanderlust was one thing. It also, I think, really fostered my need for that feeling of freedom and independence since I was young and I was feeling, so stifled as most teenagers do in their little towns with their little families and all.
Absolutely. When you were talking about that, it reminded me, and I completely forgot about this, my very last trip to Florida. We've been different places in Florida. The one place from when I was the littlest, the cottages got torn down, so we went someplace else. But then I think the very, very last trip that I went, and this must have been, I think, only like a few years ago. I was in college. Um, it was back to that original little island.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was technically an island. Um, but the really cool thing is that I was self-aware enough to realize the importance, like I mentioned earlier, of exploring that little beach as a kid. And so I made it a point, you know what, instead of going between those two pools and that one little beach, I'm going to circle the entire island. And so I did. Um, I rented a bike, and that was pretty cool. It was like a sand tire bike that had fat tires that could go, you know, I think on almost any sand except for like the really, really dry, powdery sand. But it was really cool because it was an important, I don't know, allegory maybe in realizing how much I'd grown up since then,
Yeah.
and how big the world is to me now versus
Yeah,
how
yeah.
narrow it was back then. Um, but yeah, I was glad I was able to do that, and most of the time I was alone as well, and so I just went wherever I wanted to, and if something caught my eye, caught my interest, I just went over to it and spent as much time as I wanted to there, without the hindrance of wondering whether or not I was holding up my friend, or you know
Mm-hmm.
spending too much time doing something stupid. It didn't matter.
Yeah, definitely.
Let me see here. I'm checking my notes. I had a couple things written down. Um, oh yeah, in the middle of this whole thing, from being 1 year old up to being early 20s or something like that, somewhere in
Mm-hmm.
the middle there of my tween or teen years, all of my friends, when we would go down to Florida together as multiple families, we got into skimboarding. um,
Mm.
and for the audience who doesn't know what skimboarding is, it's basically poor man's version of surf, less dangerous. Um, the boards are smaller, they don't have those fins underneath. And basically, what you do is you take the um, very, very shallow, I don't know, film of water that comes in whenever a wave strikes the shore. Um, you throw the board onto it and then you jump on with it. And then you ride that little film of water into the waves. Um, and it was really interesting. I got good at it pretty quick just because all my friends were doing it. But it was also really cool because we got into a culture of skimboarders. Like we would see people with skimboards and they'd be like, "Oh dude, have you been to that beach over there? It's got like this super flat sand that has like a really long lasting water that you can skimboard on." We are like, "No, where is it?" And he's like, "It's over there. You have to walk for 15 or 30 minutes or something like that." And we were just like, "Well, what is this place? We have to go there." And sure enough, there was like dozens of skimboarders there just like
Yeah.
doing their stuff, and it was so cool to be. It's kind of like those embellished skateboard movies, like being part of the hype.
Oh,
It was
yeah,
kind of like
yeah.
that. It was the same feeling. um but yeah, that was so cool, and I mean, I know for sure that I'll never experience anything like that again.
Mm-hmm. That's so cool. Yeah, I think one of my memories that I don't think I could ever, ever, ever recreate in my wildest dreams was like Christmas break from school whenever I was 14 was the first time I ever, like long term, by long term, I mean like a full week, I just let myself go and be so, so lazy. At the beginning of the week, I had a slumber party with my friends, and I had a pretty moderately sized room. I had like a TV and a desk and a bed. And since all of my friends were over, we put this big air mattress in my room as well. And so my entire room kind of became bed with like no room for walking at all, since I already had like this desk and a TV in there.
Hmm.
And once my friends left, I just never picked up the air mattress because I loved it so, so much. And I remember I spent the next like 4 or 5 days just playing Kingdom Hearts on repeat in my room with the blinds drawn under the covers, like, and just that feeling of being so holed up in my room with my PS2 controller in my hands, staring at a
Yeah.
television, like complete kind of gross nerd paradise. I
Yeah.
was I was so in my own world, and I feel so much shame and guilt, so much, or I keep saying so much, but I feel that a lot whenever I let myself indulge like that. And especially because no one else in my family was a gamer. No one else in my friend and my family cared about like Kingdom Hearts or anything like that. We're a
Hmm.
very like artistic and academically driven family, and so usually that would kind of deter me from playing more than 1 or 2 hours straight. But man, I took that week, and during the day I was playing Kingdom Hearts, and during the night I was like watching full playthroughs of the games that I didn't own the consoles for. It was just
Mm.
non-stop Kingdom Hearts, and I was in my room in the dark, and every single time I left my room, my eyes hurt from the light, and I just ate like cookies and cake the whole time.
The
It was,
responsibilities of being an adult.
yeah, it was so, so fun. And I don't even think I really want to like go that far ever again, but it was nice to feel what that felt like, and enjoy it while I could. It was so amazing and so fun.
Yeah, simply time or privacy being a commodity creates those moments, and
Mhm.
yeah, that's as much of a vacation as you could ever ask for, to be honest.
Yeah.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think that's going to wrap it up for today. um, so Sleepy, will have an episode of this podcast on her channel as well,
Mm-hmm.
featuring me. So if you really liked this podcast, feel free to go over to her channel. I put a link in the description right down there below. Feel free to check out her channel. She's amazing. Thank you so much, Sleepy.
Thank you for having me.